Hello and welcome to Opening the Curtain, an interview series of artists in conversation with students. My name is Kelly Mou and I'm a junior at Gunn High School. Today I'm interviewing Mina Morita, who's a barrier director and artistic director at Crowded Fire Theater Company. Hi Mina, nice to have you
Hi.
here today.
Thanks for having me.
I have a question for you. What is your job and what does that entail?
So I am part of a team who are leading Crowded Fire Theater, and I'm the artistic director. And what that means to me is that I am here to help shape an artistic process of development and production with a number of other incredible artists. And then I'm here to support them in their visioning that work. Really, it's about identifying the voices who are envisioning a future or envisioning a way of thinking about our lives differently. For me, they're definitely, for us, it's important that we're supporting BIPOC voices, usually voices that are underserved or marginalized in some way, and providing them with the resources they need to make the work that they can and want to. I mean, it's like trying to ensure that the theater and the narratives that we're supporting reflect everybody who, is in the world around us. And that certainly doesn't look one kind of a way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you get to where you are right now?
A meandering path, I would say. I was very much involved in visual arts field, and at some point that became very lonely for me. And so I also had a common love for theater. And so when I had the chance in school, basically, I went in one direction and then changed course, and then went to NYU for theater. And then since then have just consistently been working towards it, but in between have had all kinds of jobs from human resources to recruiting to working with an educational theater program, and then working at Berkeley Rep. And I've just sort of been more interested in being a theater maker than one type of theater person. And I've arrived at Crowded Fire because to me, what was really important right now, especially, is community, and like how and what does that mean to me is like the artists who are really interrogating and looking at current structures the way they are and trying to figure out how we can change them and make them more just, and more, I don't know, courageous, more brave.
Did you always like theater as a kid, or is it like oh, I realized it's my dream when I'm older thing?
I always loved theater, but I think, like many people, I came to it because I was someone who was very shy, or, was looking for some sort of connection to other people. And it was like the one place where I felt like I was able to connect with others and find some sense of expression of myself, or at least to investigate what that was, whoever the self is. I think it keeps changing, right? And then it was the one place where I was able to bring multiple skills that I felt like I had an interest, including visual arts. Like, I think very much as a director, I love concepts. I love thinking about, of course, in service to the play and the playwright. But I love to think about how we move through space, that collectively we can create an entire world in order to reflect some really important questions that we're exploring as human beings.
So why do you love what you do?
Especially this last year, there's been a chance to really ask that question of myself, even though I haven't been in rehearsal, which is, it's a chance to push on the comforts we have, the complacency we often have about who we are and how the world is. It's one of the very few types of work or creation, I think, of being a creator in the world, where you are constantly pushing yourself to think differently, to expand thinking rather than reduce thinking. I think a lot of fields ask us to reduce into digits, or structures, how we approach the world. It's also one of the few places where you truly work with multiple people, and the only way you can actually have a production or have a play come to life is because there's so many people in the room with the same goal that you have, which is to serve the story. Most of the time there is just joy because it is a place that allows one to express oneself, experiment, play as adults. Often we don't think in those terms. And I think there's a lot of illness and insecurity and fear because there's distrust of what exists. And in fact, if we opened our hearts, that we wouldn't see that that's the main way that we have to choose to exist. What are the main, like, what's a moment you were talking about being creative? Like, what are moments you felt so creative?
I really like to write, and sometimes I write stories that um, I like to write about people around me and make their stories interesting because I feel like everyone deserves a voice and like everyone's got stories.
Why do you think stories are important?
Because stories people write. I think the reason I want to write is because we write stories to make sure that bad things don't happen again and to bring awareness, so more people understand the true story behind something or like feelings.
Hmm. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like also stories give value to different perspectives and also allows us to like deeply understand something emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And then because of that, we can start to understand our own behaviors and our own needs differently, which often creates more bridges or more opportunities to be more inclusive.
Do you miss being in theater right now?
I do. I was in a workshop in December and it was a little bit like pulling cobwebs out of my head and being like, oh, yeah, I haven't directed in so long. I just really miss being in a room together, laughing together, having discoveries together, trying something, finding it not work, that it doesn't work, and then going back and exploring it again, opening it up. And just being in the theater, that sense of all of the design elements coming together.
Are you like getting creative with like trying to bring things online, or are you just planning for the future?
In the beginning of COVID, I was 2 weeks into a rehearsal process. I was a visiting artist at UC Berkeley. And we decided, we had a moment where like, okay, which direction do we go at that time? If we can all remember, we're like, do we think we might be back by the end of the semester? Do we think, all those things? And I felt like it was pretty clear once I was starting to understand the ramifications and the scientific conclusions that people were arriving at that we wouldn't. So we decided to make it into an audio play. It was a chance for all of us in the middle of this chaotic response and like trying to understand what was happening, the anxiety for the students and I to be able to be together and to find comfort in our presence together in the rehearsal room, making something. In terms of Crowded Fire, what we've been doing is we have a Twitch stream that's every Tuesday night, and we're centering Black artists and voices and really starting to think about future inspirations and sort of like the great arts advocacy and civic advocacy, and also question around Black liberation and indigenization, trying to think about all of the communities that are marginalized and have often not been included in theater.
How do you think that visuals can help with like bringing across the theme? Because I know like of course the lines are important in a play, but how do you think the visuals help with like stage directions and like the background and everything?
Yeah, I mean, we are social animals, right? And we are visual, we have different senses depending on our access. And color can change emotion, right? Can influence emotion. I think Often I love, as a visual artist, I love the idea of different spaces creating metaphor for a feeling in a world, in a moment. One might not pick up on all the cues as one's watching a piece, but the most, I think, incredible plays and productions are able to pull in layer after layer of that, so that by the time you're leaving the theater, it's somehow all landing and you're still digesting it, and hopefully not forgetting about it by the time you get home, right? I mean, that's like, to me, the difference between consuming theater and then an experiencing theater that lives with you.
What are some advice you give me to like pay attention to details and see like the visuals?
I would say, when you're looking at the space, like, really look at everything that is there. When the colors start to change, even if it's a very slow fade, pay attention. That's part of a design that's making, wanting to make you feel and think a kind of a way, potentially. If someone's saying something and it feels like the sound is moving you in a different direction, ask yourself why. It's interesting because sometimes when I'm watching a piece, my critical mind is moving too fast. And I lately, not lately, but as I watch more and more theater, then I wish I could turn that critical mind off a little bit so I can just simply live in it. There must be some way to live in it and then watch it again and then watch it with a critical mind, because I do think there's something about, we put too much weight on the intellect. And I do think that there's something about the ritual of theater, of being in a space together, that is beyond that. And that's equally important. And sometimes we won't know, we won't even unpack what it is we experienced until much later. But if it's a really great piece, then it will come back to us. When you're writing, what do you look at photos? Do you listen to music? Do you just simply like a blank page, and like, do you write on your computer, or do you write, on paper? Or
I write on my computer, but I want to try and get back to writing on paper. I haven't actually like touched a pencil in so long because of quarantine and everything's just online. But I think there's something about writing, like holding a pen and a paper, that's different than typing it up.
yeah, it definitely is. Do you like listen to music, or do you collage, or do you do different other things too?
I just like I like to go outside for a walk and gather ideas and come back and then I have it in my head and just start writing.
How has this time during COVID affected your writing?
I have so many more stories to tell because just all the feelings that I've been like just kind of like not giving attention paying attention to. I've just been like storing so many feelings in the back of my head that I've because like school is stressful. I just don't have time for that. And once quarantine started, like all these feelings just rushed out, and I'm like, oh my god, I have so many things to write about, and I just have so many
Mhm.
ideas, and I have time, all the time in the world to write about things. Have you been doing more creative work or like just like stage work and as a director?
During this time, do you mean? Or
Yeah, during this time at home.
no, in fact, I've been really focused on the We See You White American Theater movement, along actually with my colleague Jeffrey Lowe, who through TheatreWorks. But there's a number of us who are really trying to engage this region of theater makers and theaters to look at the practices and the structures we've put in place that are not making this kind of life or theater period accessible to everyone. I've been thinking a lot about myself as a stakeholder in the community, as opposed to like the artistic director of Crowded Fire. There's something about this time that it's been important for me. I mean, of course, I'm still doing all the things that I need to do for Crowded Fire, but my attention has really shifted a little bit, because it feels like this is a moment that's especially important, to try to shift the needle around the racism that has been rampant in the theater world.
So I have a final question for you that I've been asked multiple times. I actually wrote an essay about it. If you can talk to any person, like from the dead or alive, who would you talk to or have a dinner with?
Oh. I would choose Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote Emergent Strategy. Adrienne is an incredible spiritual leader in terms of thinking about social justice movements, and has been really considering the power of mass compassion, or like many people drowning out sort of the fear and the white supremacist sort of power hoarding, power hungry elements through compassion and collective work with BIPOC folks. To imagine a world where we're not being led by someone and organizations that are trying to constantly reduce or hem in or bar, but instead to think about humans and center our relationships and center compassion. And that if we all learn this, and learn how to work in this way and live in this way, and then spread that around 10 times over. Just can you imagine the power of that? And I think about theater and how that is so perfectly aligned for that kind of work. If we could just learn how to be outside of the plays we create. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today, Mina. It was amazing to learn about your career, and I hope that you do really well and you have so many more creative work and director work to do in the future. And I hope that Credit Fire is going to hopefully like open back soon and then bring more reform and love to the world.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It was really great to have this conversation. Please do stay
No,
in
for me too. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to Opening the Curtain, Artists in Conversation with Students, a collaboration between TheatreWorks Silicon Valley and Palo Alto Unified School District as part of the Kennedy Center Partners in Education program. We will continue to explore different careers available in the performing arts throughout the school year. Please join us for the next set of videos in the series at the end of each month at theatreworks.org.